loyal clients who have been with us for the longest. It will be around 60 people. And I'm almost on my way because it will start 6:30, but we should be there at 5 to like finish everything, preparing everything. But it's Thursday, so I'm doing a live stream for you as well. Hence this hat, I'm getting ready. Today's topic is about permanent residence permit for EU citizens. So let's go through that swiftly. If you have any questions regarding this, shoot it in the chat, in the comments, and I'll be happy to answer those. So, first of all, a lot of EU citizens don't think about getting a permanent residence permit in the Czech Republic at all, for various reasons. The main one being that still at this point, end of 2025, EU citizens don't need any residence permit to live in the Czech Republic. It will very likely change in 2026. I've been repeating it again because when the immigration law changes, that was supposed to happen already this year, but then the government change happened and they like stopped it. But very likely they will get back to it and approve it next year. So very likely from 2026, EU citizens will need the registration certificate to live in the Czech Republic. And permanent residency kind of follows that, but as of now, it's not needed. So many EU citizens don't actually think about it at all. But getting the permanent residency in the Czech Republic gives you some additional benefits as an EU citizen as well. So in my opinion, it's worth getting it, but many people don't think about it. So that was a long intro, but usually for EU citizens, the only thing as of now you have to do is go to the foreign police, get registered within the first 30 days in the Czech Republic, and that's basically it. If you plan on staying longer than, let's say, a year, then it's recommended, and again, from next year, very likely it will be mandatory anyway, to get a certificate of temporary residence, or so-called registration certificate. It's basically just a piece of paper saying that you legally reside in the Czech Republic, which has some other benefits, tax benefits, and you can register your car here, all that stuff. I've done another video about this topic not that long ago, so just can go back to one of the videos and watch it. But the registration certificate also makes your permanent residence permit application easier, because one of the requirements, either way you go, I will cover two main ways how you can do this, but either way you go, you need to prove that you've been here living long enough. And that it's way easier to do if you have the registration certificate, because that's basically the only thing you have to submit. If you don't have the registration certificate, that gets way more complicated. So another reason to get the registration certificate right when you move here, because a lot of people move here just for a year, and like 10 years later, well, fuck, I could have had Czech citizenship and I don't even have the registration certificate yet. So yeah, anyway, so two ways how you can get the permanent residence permit. One is the standard way, which means exactly what I described right now. So you come here, you register with the foreign police, you get the registration certificate from the Ministry of the Interior, and then after 5 years, you apply for the permanent residence permit. The application, honestly, is relatively straightforward, and you don't really risk there anything as an EU citizen, because if the permanent residence permit, you make some mistakes or whatever, they will not deport you. You will just need to start over and maybe anyway pay some assistance. So although it is recommended to hire assistance if you don't speak fluent Czech and you don't have experience with the documents, you can probably handle it on your own. And I will share an article where we describe the whole process in the description of the video when it uploads, so you can read through everything, and if you're brave enough, you can go through that yourself. If you don't want to go through that, which, like, why would you yourself, then you can hire us to take care of that. Yeah, but why I was saying, I'm already like in a Christmas mood, so my brain is, or maybe this is like pressing my head too much. Anyway, so if you apply after 5 years of living here, you will need to prove that you've been really living here for 5 years. But if you have the registration certificate, that's basically everything the ministry needs. There might be potentially situations where they request some additional documents, but that's not usually the case. You have the registration certificate that kind of proves that you've been here the whole time. If you want to get the permanent residence permit without having the registration certificate, it's possible as well if you've been living here for 5 years, but then it gets more complicated because you need to prove that you have actually been living here. And that might sound easy when I'm saying it like this, but in real life it's often not very easy because you must be here for 5 continuous years. So ideally there should be no gaps in between your documents. So let's say how you prove that. So usually prove the continuous residence combining couple documents. One is a lease agreement. So if you have a lease agreement, you moved into an apartment 5 years ago, you're still in the same apartment, you have all the extensions of the lease agreement, super easy. And that proves very well that you've been here living the whole time. But let's say you initially lived somewhere, then you moved again somewhere else, and then again, so you had like 3-4 different apartments. Maybe you don't even have all the lease agreements anymore. Or maybe in some of the apartments you didn't have a lease agreement because it was your friend's apartment or something. And then you cannot really prove that you've been living here using the lease agreements because there will be gaps in between those. So that can get complicated there. Second set of documents you can use to prove that you've been living here long enough is your employment contract or potentially a trade license if you're a freelancer. But it's kind of the same thing. If you're employed the same 5 years, same company, you have all the employment contracts, that's pretty straightforward. But if you change jobs or you maybe had some periods of time where you didn't have a job, also might be complicated to prove that you've been living here the whole 5 years. The thing is that the ministry sometimes, now it's getting better, I think they're more reasonable, but in the past what we've seen was that they, for example, said that because you had in your employment contract your British address, for example, before Brexit, or some like foreign address and not an address in the Czech Republic, that basically means that you were not working in the Czech Republic, but you could have worked from the UK or somewhere. And they were like really making trouble for EU citizens to get PR because of these like small things. So although it might sound like super straightforward on paper, or when I'm saying that, like proving your 5 years of residence here, it might get a bit complicated depending on your situation. If you're a freelancer, that might be the easiest unless you've paused the trade license for some time. So if you had the trade license active for the full 5 years, that's the easiest situation. If there were gaps in between where you maybe like changed from freelancer to an employee and stuff like that, again, it might complicate things. But usually what works best is going to a public health insurance company where you've been registered and getting an official confirmation, because as long as you live in the Czech Republic, someone has to pay for your health insurance. Usually it's your employer if you're employed, or it's yourself if you're self-employed. So usually, regardless of your situation, there will be a record of someone paying for the full 5 years at your health insurance company. Obviously, unless you've been living here based on your savings or investments or retirement or whatever, and you're not contributing to the public healthcare system, then it can get very, very difficult to prove that you've actually been here. We've had cases where we had to provide like a membership in a gym, or that the person was picking up their child every day from the school, like a primary school. They had to write some statement about it. So it can get complicated. Depends on your case. In some cases, you can potentially get the permanent residency also after 2 years of living here, but that's kind of a very specific situation, which only applies if you are a close family member of another EU citizen. So if you're married to another EU citizen living in the Czech Republic, and that citizen is either a Czech citizen or an EU citizen living here and already holding permanent residence permit. So let's say you're married to a Czech citizen, then you can apply for a permanent residence permit after 2 years of living here. If you want to do the same thing with a French citizen, for example, then the French citizen would have to have a permanent residence permit in the Czech Republic already. But if they do, and you move here just now because you just got married or because you were traveling between France and the Czech Republic, you can apply for a permanent residence permit after 2 years as well. But either a Czech citizen or an EU citizen with a permanent residency already. Let's see if there are some questions now regarding this topic. Hi Jan, it's great to see your live stream earlier than usual. Thank you for your help and information as usually. Wish you and the team best for the new year. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes, I would like to do the live streams this early. Usually it doesn't work out, but today I'm forced because of the Christmas party, which will be starting very soon. So that's Christmas. I don't want to say fault. It's like a positive thing. So Christmas doing, let's say. And thank you very much for being here and watching. I lost my job while having EU blue card. I have only 3 months to find a new job. Is there a way to lengthen the period? That's not really related to this topic, so I'll just answer very briefly. Not really. You can change to a different type of residence permit if possible, but you cannot just extend the period. Blah, blah, blah. Best city to study in Czech Republic. Also, that's not related to this live stream. I will be doing another live stream right away when I finish this one. And that's only for joiners. So if you have questions that are not related to this topic, EU citizens permanent residence permit, then become a joiner and I will go live in 3 minutes in the joiner section and I'll be happy to answer all your questions there. As for what you need for the permanent residence permit as an EU citizen, there is not that many documents actually, and that's why I was saying that you might be able to do it on your own. So one thing, application form, nothing too complicated there. Passport or EU national ID. So you don't need to have a passport if you're from the EU, but you need to have some form of ID. 2 passport size photos, easy. Proof of accommodation. That generally is your lease agreement, but then it can get complicated because since you don't really risk anything and you don't really need the registration certificate or the permanent residency, often EU citizens do not really verify their lease agreements that much when they're signing it. And often with EU citizens, when we start working together, for example, only for the permanent residence application or even for the registration certificate, we find out that their apartment is actually not either an apartment or they didn't sign the lease agreement directly with the landlord. And in these cases, you cannot really use the lease agreement for any official purposes. So that can basically like destroy your whole plan for getting the permanent residency. But generally straightforward lease agreement. Then you need to prove that you've been living here long enough, so either 5 years for most cases or 2 years in case you are a close family member of another EU citizen living here, which I explained before, that it can either be the registration certificate, which is pretty straightforward, or it must be all the other documents such as lease agreements for all the 5 years, employment contract or trade license, healthcare payments for 5 years, all that. 200 crowns admin fee that's paid at the Ministry of the Interior when you're submitting the application, and then a power of attorney. If you work with us, we usually get a power of attorney so we can represent you in front of the Ministry of the Interior and like act on your behalf there. Yeah, so again, if you don't want to deal with this on your own and you want to save yourself some nerves, we'll be happy to help you with that. That being said, you can also try yourself and see how it goes. Very likely it will be fine, but if you need any help, you can get back to us anytime later. And maybe just one more thing to show you, and that's what it actually looks like. The permanent residence permit for EU citizens is not a card, as you know from standard permanent residency. But it's this kind of like passport looking thing with this. So just fun part that this photo is actually like a physical photo just glued there. So it's kind of like, it looks like your daughter or your son like created it in their kindergarten as a project of like Monday arts class. But Yeah, that's how it is. The registration certificate is just folded piece of paper without even like your photo and anything. So this one is stepping up. And that's kind of it. If you have any questions regarding this topic, comment under the video. I will see if there are any questions regarding this here. Hey bro, my family reunification is under processing. Can I change my address for my wife during the process? Does it affect the processing? Again, this is not an open Q&A live stream. I will be doing that in 2 minutes in the joiners section. So if you're really interested in me answering the question, become a joiner, join me in 2 minutes. I'll be happy to answer that. Generally, I don't really recommend changing address during the processing because that can influence the process and it must be handled well because you also need to change it for yourself before you change it for your spouse. So it might get a bit tricky. As for buying insurance or getting in touch for anything, ideally go to my bio here on YouTube and there is a link where you can just go and fill in a form and we'll be happy to get back to you. That's the easiest. Regarding visa interview, can you answer? And issues, say to visa interview or not? Okay. Unfortunately, this is not an open Q&As. I only answer questions regarding the EU permanent residency, but I will be finishing the live stream right now and I will be starting another one in the joiners section. So if you want me to answer all your questions not related to EU citizens, become a joiner and I'll be happy to answer your questions there right now. Otherwise, I will see you again, guys, Monday, Thursday, until the end of the world.